Welcome back to Building Your Life podcast with John Browning. My name is Doug Sandler, co-hosting the podcast with John. John, there's been a lot of interesting information in the news, and I know that we're going to talk about it. But before we get into it, it's been about a month since we've gotten together to do these recordings. So, what's been going on in your life in the last 30 days?
Well, it's been a busy time, and we've got two little grandchildren that are running around. One of them is, a year and a half, and although they would tell me how many months, which I don't know, what is it about guys that we don't do the month thing? But
I think that
one's a
lasts
year and
until
a
you
half.
that lasts until you get about to 23 months. I think as soon as you hit 24 months, it becomes 2 years. So how old am I? I am 1,050
Yeah,
1,050 months.
exactly. Yeah, but we've been having some fun with them because my son-in-law has been traveling a little bit, and so they've been over here at the house, and it's been a lot of fun. But the having a I think that'd be a 19-month-old and a 4-month-old at the same time. That is, I know why we're parents when we're younger.
Oh my gosh, so much energy. My girlfriend and I were out just to go into a restaurant yesterday, and we saw a couple, and they probably were in their, I guess, early mid 30s, and they had what I would think would be about a little under a 2-year-old, probably an 18-month-old, and
Yeah.
and she seemed to be like 4 or 5 months pregnant. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, God bless that couple, because they are in for it. Not only are they in for it when it comes to just lack of sleep, but the financial side of things when the kids are in college. Yeah, college these days, it's crazy how expensive college is.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we'll have to do a podcast episode on 529 plans and whether you should or whether you shouldn't do that. I think I've done one. We did one. If you want to look back in the archives, you may want to look back on that. We've done one, but might be time to hit that again.
All right, well, let's talk about some
Sorry.
current events, because since we are actually recording this pretty close to when all of this craziness was going on in the banking world, and when I connected with you today, we started to have that initial conversation. So why don't you give me a 35,000-foot view of what happened in the last 48 hours as of the recording of this, and let's talk about some of the meanings behind some of the stuff that's going on in the banking world.
Yeah, Doug, I think this is important enough, but we usually don't talk about current events on the Building Your Life podcast. But given how important what has happened in the last, when we're talking today, roughly about 48 hours, we've had 3 banks, 3 of them fail.
Yeah.
Is it reminiscent of the run on the banks? Is it, and people get real emotional about this. Couple things that I hope people realize with this one: first of all, sort of cause and effect, and second, what type of banks are we looking at when we're saying, hey, these banks failed? So cause and effect, and this is something that if anybody wants to listen to my daily morning update that I do, is 5 minutes long, super quick. You can find that on Substack, Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever I am that gets published. But when the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee, raises rates, that's one thing. When they raise rates as fast as they raised them this particular time, which is faster than at any time in history, in a greater volume than at any time in history. And people will argue and say, well, Volcker raised it from 10 to 20. Well, so he raised it 100, basically, what's that, one time, right?
Right.
We've raised it like 4, 5, 6, 20 times. We've raised it 20 times what he started at.
Wow.
So it's really hard to argue with me on that point. It is a massive shock. You know how when you get into the pool and it just, at first, it just seems like freezing cold.
Yeah, jumping over from the hot tub into the regular pool, the shock effect, it's actually good for you, but at the same time, it's not good for you either, because it scares the crap out of you.
You feel it, right? That's kind of how I liken what just happened with rates. And the same thing, right? If you take something that's really hot, like you take it out of the fire and you put it directly in water, a lot of times that thing will actually break.
Right.
Because of the shock. Well, that's kind of what has happened. And we've heard a little bit about that. We're going to raise rates until something breaks. Well, something definitely broke.
Okay.
this past week.
So can we go back for those that are in our community that are listening to this right now who have no idea even what we're talking about? Can you just share what happened, the run on the bank, or maybe not the run on the bank, but the emotion on the bank? Talk
Yeah.
about the actual thing that happened.
Yeah. So again, we've had three of them, three fairly major. I mean, they're not like the mega banks that began to experience, first of all, and this is a little tough to explain in a way that people not familiar with it will fully understand. But the way banks make their money is they, generally speaking, they lend money out to us at one rate, and then they either buy, maybe they buy assets um, and they make up the difference in terms of what they charge us. They charge us a really high rate, and then they give us a really low rate on our deposits. Right,
Right,
that's how
right,
they make their money,
right, right,
and they can go up to 10 times per regulations. They can leverage themselves up to 10 times. So what has happened in one of the bank's case is that 10 times leverage, they were buying assets, right? At one level, the Federal Open Market Committee started to raise the rates that that the bank was required to pay. And suddenly that relationship, when they were buying very safe, we'll
hmm
call them safe treasury bonds, right, as their collateral for that. But remember, during 2022, even treasury bonds were down as much as equities were. So those assets that were backing all of this began to decline in value. And then during 2022, what also happened is we as consumers began to drastically draw down our savings that we put to work when we were getting free money and during COVID when we weren't spending money traveling and everything
right.
else. So you got those two things really hurting the banks. And suddenly people then began to hear about it, right? That, hey, these banks may be having trouble. So then there's began the run on the bank. And as opposed to how it used to be, you'd have to walk down to the bank, and you'd have to sit in line, you'd have to draw your money out. Well, now you go on your cell phone, I want to withdraw the money right now, and boom, it's gone. It's somewhere else. You've put it somewhere else.
All right.
Things
So
happen really quick.
just in essence, though, what's the problem with that? Is it that the bank doesn't have enough money to pay the people because they're leveraged? The bank doesn't have enough money to pay the people that want to withdraw the money, and so they just say, "Hey, we don't have any more money." Is that what happens?
Okay, so I don't want to throw anybody into a panic, right? But that is essentially correct. Now, the Treasury Department guarantees up to $100,000 of your deposits in the bank. So what happened with these three banks is the Treasury came in and said, we're going to guarantee the deposits. Everybody's going to get their deposit up to $100,000. And as a matter of fact, the Treasury in this instance on Sunday said they were actually going to guarantee even
All
past
right.
that
So I think that they said no matter how much you have in the bank, we're going to guarantee that money. Now, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? I mean, I look at it and say, hey, that's good because now nobody has to be emotionally pulling their money out for fear that they're not going to be able to have access to their money. But it's a bad thing in that are we bailing out a bank that maybe, hey, the law of supply and demand and all of that stuff. It's like, hey, if they go out of business, they go out of business. It was their bad practice that or was it their bad practice? Did they didn't have any control over the stuff that was going on? Wow, it's so confusing. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, it is confusing, and I'm gonna, clearly I'm struggling to make, simplify it a little bit. But is it a good thing or bad thing? That's a really big debate out there right now, and I think my opinion is it's a good thing because you have to, for the rule of law and society that we have come to know and love here in the United States, and we can complain about it, but it's the best bad system I think in
Yeah,
the world.
yeah,
So I'm not going to complain too
it's
much,
all right.
right? And so I think it's necessary to have that trust in your banking system, which the Treasury Department is providing. That said, it's doing exactly the opposite of what the Federal Open Market Committee wants to happen. They're trying to draw money out of the system. That's why they're raising rates to combat inflation. Well, suddenly we're going to put Treasury Department's putting more money in.
Yeah, but isn't it just putting it into such a small section? I mean, while these are three major banks, two of them related to technology, I think one outside, just, again, we can talk about that for a second. But aren't they just fixing a system so that we don't have all of this emotional? Because really, that's what it is. It's everybody is just gets caught up in this whirlwind of this frenzy, and they all want to get their money. And the reality of it is, if you would just take a beat, just pause for a second, and not do anything, we know that in this particular case, the federal government is going to guarantee it all. So why would anybody even need to think about it? Why couldn't we just let it ride? And that, I think that comes to people not believing or trusting the system is going to actually work.
Right. People not trusting it, or thinking that, or feeling that they won't have control over it. It may be a few days, and nobody wants to think that money in the bank is supposed to be there, right
Right.
there, right as soon as I go. And
except
sometimes it can be
except
a
for when
lag.
the except for when like a bank wants to give me a refund on an accidental like
Yeah, then
charge.
it
They
takes
say
a few
it'll take
weeks.
a couple. I'm like, what? It took you literally 3 seconds to get that out of my account. Why does it take another 5 days for me to get it back
I've
again?
always wondered that. Yeah, I have wondered that myself.
I
Yeah,
understand. All right. So the bottom line with it is though that the reason we wanted to talk about this was why, because I think you prefaced before I hit record, you prefaced it about, we're talking about the emotion and people, doing
yeah,
exactly what they shouldn't be doing, which is what?
yeah. Which is a knee jerk reaction, right? That when you almost all of the time, sometimes, yeah, you need to just run, right, and you need to run right now. But almost all of the time, anything that you do, whether if you're driving and you see something in front of you, if you jerk the wheel to the right or to the left, you're going to
Yeah.
go into a skid. You're likely to have a worse reaction
Right.
than if you did things more in moderation.
All right.
Same thing with, I got to get my money out right now, or I need to do something completely different than I was doing yesterday because this one isolated, somewhat isolated event happened.
All right, so that we don't go down the rabbit hole too deep with this, and for those of you that want to get more information about this, there's a world of Google and that you can probably find out good, bad, and ugly about it as well. If somebody were your client and they were asking you, "Hey, John, here's what's going on. I have a lot of my money in funds and things that you're controlling, but some of the money is in one of these three banks." What would your advice? Can you share that? Is that legal for you to share your advice here?
I cannot give advice. This is not investment advice. But if somebody were to ask me that, I will say my opinion is
Yeah.
you're going to be just fine. The federal government has guaranteed your deposit. There's no reason to jerk all your money out immediately, things like that. Again, that's just my opinion. Your heart, if it's telling you something different, you're going to get your money back. So maybe you want to go over to maybe a little bit bigger bank or whatever. The other thing about these three banks, two of those banks were really more for very large investors, and they were involved in the crypto space and like the Peter Thiels of the world, right? These big guys. So it's hard to feel too sorry that they may not be able to get their cash out within 24 hours. But that's you always should, if it's in the bank, be able to get it out. But it's not. The one bank, Signature Bank, is more of a mainstream bank that you and I would use. But here again, all of your deposits are guaranteed by the federal government. There's no need to panic. The other thing that I get from clients is, well, if that's happening, then it's a domino effect, and we're going to see all kinds. It's going to be just another Great Depression and all that. I don't think that's the case. Again, just opinion. But what we've seen is that it's really been isolated to the banking sector. We've seen like all of the banks, especially regional banks, smaller banks, decline like 20-30% within the last couple of days. On the flip side, the S&P 500, the Dow Jones 30, last time I looked before we were talking, they were actually up for the day.
Mm-hmm.
Even the NASDAQ was up for the day. So I think if you want to like get scared about the overall market, might not be a good idea either to jerk that wheel to the right or the left and make any big decisions based on this, again, fairly isolated event.
So lesson learned here when it comes to emotion, I would say, in my opinion, it would be to act slowly, observe, but act slowly, be wise about your money. Certainly connect with a guy like John. If you have any questions about how to put this together, you can actually, if you want to get more information, I think you have this new fancy technology, this text technology to reach you, don't you?
That's right. Yeah. If you text life, the word life, to 321-421-5213, then you'll get my digital business card. And on that card is all of my links to all sorts of free information for you. And then at the lower right hand side, there's a spot, and I'm happy to talk with anybody. You can schedule some time on my calendar just by clicking that link and spend 15, 20 minutes, and we'll see if maybe I can add some value to what you're doing. And if not, then it's nice to meet you.
Don't let emotion rule the day. Text life to 321-421-5213. Get in touch with John and his team, and you'll find that you will be a little bit more emotionally secure if you get in touch with John. John, thanks for hanging out with us another day. We'll figure out, as of probably the next series of podcast episodes, how close we were with what's going on in the market when we get there. Thanks for being here.
Yep.